Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Monday, Yom Sheni. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Monday? Melissa in Great Neck, Bella in Florida, Sharon in New Jersey, Joe in the Inland Empire, Lorraine in Texas, Paul in the Great Northwest, Shandor in the Bronx, Nancy, North Carolina, Renee in Indiana. Sharon says, Sal, the Giants just scored a touchdown. What will the parents say? Hoi, Hashem ki tov, ki le'olam chazdo. That's what he said on the field goals. What will he say? Hallelujah. That's a joke that I shared the other day. You can find it on our Facebook or Instagram. Great joke. It was really a football joke that I adapted into a Jewish joke. Frank in San Pedro, Hyman, Florida. Fur Corners. Who is Fur Corners? Welcome, Fur Corners in North Carolina. Elanit in Silver Spring. Ella in Southern California. Lisa in Hampton, Virginia. Welcome, everybody. Doubled off today. You know, we're running 2 ahead. I told you we'd catch up. Today we're going to be 3 ahead with God's help. But it'll be very helpful. I have an upcoming trip to visit my dad. So we'll see if I'm able to run the class from there or not. But, you know, it's always good when we have short dafs to take advantage. Okay, pages 80 and 81 here in Tractate Zevachim, the 29th volume of the Talmud. We've got a good head start on page 80a yesterday. More than halfway into it. And we are currently learning the Gemara on Mishna number 6 here in chapter 8. Okay, so below the halfway point on page 80a. And we're talking about mixtures and how to handle mixtures. You know, permitted blood and prohibited blood got mixed. So they can't be presented on the altar. Usually the sages will say it just needs to be dumped in the temple drain. Rabbi Eliezer, more lenient, can find reasons why the blood could be presented on the altar, but was usually overruled. General tenor of what's going on here. Okay, so the Gemara continues its discussion of the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis. And we learned in a Mishnah there, Tractate Para, sometimes, so Para 9.1. That's one of those tractates in the Mishnah, but not in the Talmud, because there was no Gemara on it. There are more tractates in a collection of just Mishnah than Mishnah in Gemara, which is also known as the Talmud. Okay, so in Para 9.1, we learn the Mishnah that with regard to a flask containing water of purification, right, water with the ashes of the red heifer mixed into it, that you would need if you were going to step inside the holy temple and you had come into contact with a corpse, you can't come back to the temple until you're purified. 7-day purification, which includes sprinkling with the waters of purification, which was water that was mixed with the ashes of the red heifer. Only 9 in all of Jewish history, slaughtered in a certain way on the Mount of Olives opposite the Temple Mount. We've talked about it a bunch of times. So, with regard to a flask containing water of purification, into which any amount of regular water fell, right? Water. Now, when we're talking about this, we're not talking about pure water. We're talking about water of purification. So even though some water fell into it that was absolutely pure water, distilled water, whatever was water free of all impurities, it's not water of purification. And water that's not water of purification cannot get mixed into water of purification, right? Because purification is such an important thing and requires so much attention, intention, carefulness, right? And guarding the water so it shouldn't be mixed with other things. So we learned in that Mishnah with regard to a flask containing water of purification into which any amount of regular water fell, Rabbi Eliezer says the priest should sprinkle 2 sprinklings on the ritually impure person, as in this manner he ensures that he will be sprinkled with some of the water of purification. But the rabbis, meaning the majority, who overrule Rabbi Eliezer, disqualify this mixture for the purpose of purification. And the Gemara clarifies, granted, one can understand why the rabbis disqualify the mixture, as they hold 3 opinions. They hold that there is mixing, i.e., when 2 substances are mixed together, each drop is assumed to contain a bit of each of them. And when you mix 2 liquids, right, it's going to be a complete mixing of the liquids so that any particular drop that comes out of that bottle will contain some of each liquid in the mixture. That's mixing in this concept. And they hold that an active sprinkling of the water purification requires a minimum measure of water purification. And in this case, each sprinkling contained some of the regular water. And they hold that it is of no help to sprinkle the water twice, as one cannot combine sprinklings, i.e., 2 acts of sprinkling the water of purification do not combine to render one pure. Therefore, the person is not purified if he was sprinkled with water of purification into which some amount of regular water fell. But what does Rabbi Eliezer hold? If he holds that there is no mixing, i.e., when 2 substances are mixed together, that each drop is not assumed to contain a bit of each of them, then even if one sprinkles 2 sprinklings, what of it? Perhaps on both occasions he sprinkles regular water. Rather, one must say that Rabbi Eliezer holds that there is mixing. If he holds that the act of sprinkling does not require a minimum measure, why do I need 2 sprinklings? 1 act of sprinkling would be enough. Rather, you must say that Rabbi Eliezer holds that the act of sprinkling does require a minimum measure. And if Rabbi Eliezer holds that one cannot combine sprinklings, then even if one sprinkles 2 sprinklings, what of it? And alternatively, if he holds that one combines sprinklings, who says that the 2 sprinklings will amount to the minimum measure? Perhaps most of the water he sprinkled was regular water. So what is it that Rabbi Eliezer is holding? Reish Lakish says, actually, Rabbi Eliezer holds that there is mixing, and sprinkling requires a minimum measure. And here we are dealing with a case where the 2 types of water were mixed together in a ratio of 1:1. And therefore, by performing 2 sprinklings, the priest ensures that he has sprinkled the minimum measure of 1 sprinkling of water of purification. And Rava says, actually, Rabbi Eliezer maintains that there is mixing and sprinkling does not require a minimum measure. Consequently, it should suffice for the priest to perform 1 sprinkling, and the requirement to sprinkle twice is a penalty that the sages impose so that one who mixes regular water with the water purification would not benefit from this act by diluting the valuable water of purification. And Rav Ashi states a different explanation. He says that Rabbi Eliezer holds that there is no mixing, and therefore if the priest sprinkles only once, there is a concern that he might not have sprinkled any water of purification at all, and that's why he requires 2 sprinklings. And the Gemara raised an objection from a Baraisa against Reish Lakish's opinion that Rabbi Eliezer holds that sprinkling requires a minimum measure. Rebbe says, according to the statement of Rabbi Eliezer, that if the priest performs 2 sprinklings, the purification ritual is valid. A sprinkling of any amount renders the impure person ritually pure. It purifies him, as sprinkling does not require a minimum measure. And even a sprinkling that contains half fit water and half unfit water still renders the individual ritually pure because there is no minimum measure. And as long as he got some of the water of purification on him, he is purified by it. Now we're on page 80b. And the Gemara adds, and furthermore, one can raise another difficulty against the opinion of Rav Ashi, who maintains that according to Rabbi Eliezer, there is no mixing, as it is taught explicitly in a baraisa with regard to blood of an offering, for example, a sin offering, which is to be placed above the red line, that was mixed with blood of an offering, for example, a burnt offering, which is to be placed below the red line. When that happens, Rabbi Eliezer says, the priest shall initially place the blood of the mixture above the red line for the sake of the sin offering, and the priest should then place blood from the mixture below the red line for the sake of the burnt offering, and both the blood placed above and the blood placed below count for him toward the fulfillment of the mitzvah. And so the Gemara explains the difficulty from this baraisa, and if you say that there is no mixing, why do both of the placements count for him? Perhaps he placed the blood of the mixture that belongs above the red line below it, and the blood that belongs below the red line above it. So it must be that Rabbi Eliezer does believe in mixing. So the Gemara answers, here we are dealing with a case where there is a majority of blood that is to be placed above the red line, and the priest places blood, and the priest placed blood above by the measure of the blood in the mixture that is to be placed below the line, and slightly more blood. In this manner, he ensures that he must have placed above the red line some of the blood that belongs there. But the Gemara raises a difficulty. But the Baraisa teaches the blood placed below counts for him toward the fulfillment of the mitzvah. And according to this explanation, it is possible that all the blood of the burnt offering was placed above the red line. Why then has he fulfilled the mitzvah by placing the blood below the red line? And the Gemara explains, the Baraisa does not mean that it counts for the mitzvah of the placing of the blood of a burnt offering below the red line. Rather, it means that it counts for him for the sake of the remainder of the blood of the sin offering, which must be poured out on the base of the altar. Before we go much further with this mixing of bloods that needs to be placed above or below the red line, and the remainder that needs to be poured out on the base of the altar, I want to just finish for a second with water of purification that got mixed with regular water and where that law ended up. With regard to one who sprinkles water of purification once on several people or on a number of vessels, whoever or whatever touched any of the water is ritually purified. So there is no minimum measure for the water of sprinkling. Although this ruling is apparently not in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, who require a minimum measure for sprinkling, the requirement applies only to the water in the vessel, not to the water that is sprinkled. Right? The sages would say there's a minimum measure of water that's going to get mixed with ashes in the vessel from which you sprinkle. But then once the sprinkling happens, as long as any of that water touches the person, he gets the purification that he needs. Again, to be fully purified of corpse tuma, there would need to be 2 sprinklings, one on the 3rd and one on the 7th day. But that doesn't matter. But in terms of the minimum measure, any amount will do. Okay, coming back now to this mixing of blood of a sin offering and a burnt offering, and the issue of one is supposed to be presented on the altar above the red line, sin offering, the other below the red line, burnt offering, and then they got mixed. So first there's the problem of how are we going to present them on the altar above and below to make sure that both the sin offering and the burnt offering had a proper presentation of their blood on the altar. And then there's the issue of the remainder of the blood in the vessel from which some of the blood was taken to be placed on the altar. It's supposed to be poured on the base of the altar, on the horizontal section of the base of the altar. Can we do that with this intermingled mixture of blood of a burnt and a sin offering? So let's keep reading. So the Gemara suggests, come in here a proof from a baraisa. If the priest placed the mixed blood below the red line and did not consult the authorities, what should he do now? Rabbi Eliezer says he shall again place the blood above the red line, and the blood that was placed below the red line counts for him. Once again, the difficulty is that if Rabbi Eliezer maintains that there is no mixing, why does the placement count for him? Perhaps he placed the blood of the mixture that belongs above the red line below it, and the blood that belongs below the red line above it. You're imagining that these two bloods it was almost like they were sort of coagulated into little groups of one type of blood or the other. So it's not fully mixed so that any drop that you take out of that mixture will contain both bloods. That's if you don't believe in mixing, which they're saying, well, Rabbi Eliezer must believe in mixing because he says to take this mixture and apply it in those two places. Now, the Gemara answers here too, we are dealing with a case where the majority of blood belongs above the red line and the priest placed blood above from the measure of the blood in the mixture that belongs below, and slightly more there. And again, the Gemara asks, but the Baraisa teaches that the blood placed below counts for him. Since it is possible that all of the blood of the burnt offering was placed above the red line, why does the blood placed below count for him, right? If there were if two bloods were mixed, it's possible that when you put above the red line, what came out of the vessel was all the blood that was supposed to be below. That's if you don't hold by mixing. Since it is possible that all of the blood of the burnt offering was placed above the red line, why does the blood placed below count for him? And the Gemara answers that the Baraisa means it counts for him for the sake of the remainder of the sin offering, right? What gets placed on the base of the altar after the sprinkling and presentation is done. So the Gemara further suggests, come in here another proof from a Baraisa. If the priest placed the mixed blood above and did not consult the authorities, both these sages and those sages, i.e. the rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer, concede that he shall again place the blood below the red line, and these placements and those placements will count for him, right? Meaning the owner will have his obligation fulfilled. If Rabbi Eliezer maintains that there is no mixing, he would not concede this point, as perhaps he placed the blood that belongs below the red line above it, and the blood that belongs above below. So therefore it must be that Rabbi Eliezer does hold by mixing. The Gemara answers here too, this is referring to a case where the majority of the blood belongs above the line, and the priest placed blood above in the measure of the blood in the mixture that belongs below, and slightly more. In this manner, he fulfills the mitzvah of the blood that is to be placed above and the red line. In this manner, he fulfills the mitzvah of the blood that is to be placed above the red line alone. Now, the Gemara raises a difficulty, but the Baraisa teaches these and those count for him. Not only the blood that is to be placed above, but also below. So the Gemara explains, does the Baraisa teach these sages and those sages concede that these placements and those placements count for him? It teaches only these and those count for him. In other words, although the Baraisa states in the first clause that both the rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer concede that the priest returns and places the blood below the red line, this agreement does not apply to the next clause of the Baraisa, as in the latter clause, we come to the opinion of the rabbis alone and not Rabbi Eliezer, because the rabbis are the ones who say that there is mixing, which is why both placements count. And the Gemara suggests, come in here a proof from the Mishna. In a case of the blood of an offering that is to be placed on the altar with one placement that was mixed with the blood of another offering that is to be placed on the altar with one placement, this could be a bechor, right? The firstborn of a female kosher domesticated animal. Is to be placed with one placement that was mixed with the blood of another offering that is to be placed on the altar with one placement. So the blood shall be placed with one placement. And if you say that according to Rabbi Eliezer there is no mixing, why shall they be placed with one placement? Perhaps he places from this blood and does not place from that blood. And the Gemara answers, this is referring to a case where the measure of one placement of this blood was mixed with the measure of one placement of that blood and no more. Consequently, he certainly placed both types of blood. Now, the Gemara raises another difficulty. The Mishnah teaches that in the case of the blood of an offering that is to be placed on the altar with four placements that was mixed with blood of another offering that is to be placed on the altar with four placements, that could be a sin offering or a burnt offering. So the blood shall be placed with four placements. But if there is no mixing, perhaps he placed only the blood of one offering. And the Gemara explains here too. It is referring to a case where the measure of four placements of this blood was mixed with the measure of four placements of that blood, and therefore he certainly placed blood from both offerings. The Gemara raises another difficulty. The Mishnah teaches that if the blood of an offering that is to be placed on the altar with 4 placements was mixed with the blood of another offering that is to be placed on the altar with 1 placement. So that would suggest that blood of an offering of the highest sanctity, like a sin offering, was mixed with blood of an offering of lesser sanctity, like a bechor or animal tithe. So in that case, Rabbi Eliezer says the blood shall be placed with 4 placements. And here too, if there is no mixing, according to Rabbi Eliezer, perhaps he placed the blood of only one of the offerings. And if you would say, and now we're on page 81a, that here too, the Mishnah is discussing a case where the measure of 4 placements was mixed with precisely the amount of 1 placement, and therefore the priest certainly placed some blood of both offerings. If so, how would one explain the clause in the Mishnah that states, Rabbi Yehoshua said to Rabbi Eliezer, according to your opinion, doesn't the priest violate the prohibition of do not add? From where is the violation of do not add here? After all, the priest places only the measure of 1 placement from the offering that requires 1 placement. So rather, Rava says that Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis do not disagree with regard to a case of actual blood mixed together. When they disagree, it is with regard to a case of cups of blood that were intermingled. The blood didn't get mixed in with each other, but there were cups of the 2 sources of blood, and the cups became intermingled, right? So the bloods didn't get mixed within a vessel, but the vessels got mixed up, so we don't know whether this cup is blood of the burnt offering or whether this cup is blood of a bechor, etc. But the bloods themselves didn't get mixed together. So what about that situation? So when they disagreed is with regard to a case of cups of blood that were intermingled, and it is unknown which blood is in which cup. So the explanation, according to Rabbi Eliezer, is that he is of the opinion that one views the blood that was not placed properly as though it were water, and therefore it is permitted to present the blood, whereas the explanation, according to the rabbis, is that they are not of the opinion that one views the blood that was not placed properly as though it were water, and that's why all of it must be poured down the temple courtyard drain, lest you present blood that should not be presented on the altar. Now the Gemara asks, and do they not disagree with regard to blood that was mixed together? But isn't it taught in a baraisa that Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis did not disagree in the case of blood of a sin offering that was mixed with blood of a burnt offering, that the mixture shall be sacrificed, meaning it will be presented on the altar, even though we're not sure which blood comes from which offering, because they're both offerings of the highest sanctity. So they're going to agree that this gets presented to the altar, right? The terminology for that in this context is it shall be sacrificed, as opposed to it shall be disqualified and sent down the drain. Or in a case of blood that was fit for presentation that was mixed with the blood of an animal that was used in bestiality, that it shall not be sacrificed. Right? The Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis agree that if blood that was fit for the altar was mixed with blood that came from an animal that was used for bestiality, no remedy, the whole mixture goes down the drain. So with regard to what case did they disagree? With regard to blood of an unblemished animal that was mixed with the blood of a blemished animal. As Rabbi Eliezer says that it shall be sacrificed, whether in a case of blood mixed together or in a case of cups intermingled, and the rabbis say it shall not be sacrificed. And the Gemara answers Rabbi Yehuda in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, i.e. when Rabbi Yehuda teaches the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, he teaches that the dispute applies both in the case of blood mixed together and in a case of intermingled cups. But the rabbis who taught the Mishnah maintain that Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis disagree only in a case of intermingled cups. New topic. The Mishnah teaches that, back to our Mishnah, the Mishnah teaches that if the blood of a sin offering, which is to be placed above the red line, was mixed with blood of a burnt offering, which is to be placed below the line, Rabbi Eliezer holds that it shall all be placed above the red line, and one views the blood of the burnt offering that was placed there as though it is water, just a carrier for the blood that is supposed to end up there. And subsequently, the priest shall place the blood below the red line, so that the blood from the burnt offering will get applied in the right place, since it's in that mixture also. Presumably, then, the blood of the sin offering is considered like water. By contrast, the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Eliezer rule that all the blood shall be poured into the temple drain. So concerning this, Abaye says, the Mishnah taught that, according to the opinion of the rabbis, the blood shall be poured into the drain only if the first portion of the blood of a sin offering, i.e. that blood which is to be placed above the red line, and the blood of a burnt offering were mixed. Sounds like what we just said, wasn't it? But if the final portion of the blood of a sin offering, i.e. the remainder, right? So now they're talking about, well, the bloods didn't get intermixed, didn't get intermingled until after the blood was presented properly on the altar. And now it's time to pour out the remainder on the base. And somehow the bloods of the burnt offering, the sin offering got intermingled then. After atonement or obligation was achieved, right? Because the sin offering and the burnt offering were properly brought, properly slaughtered, properly blood collected, properly conveyed to the altar, and properly placed on the altar. Then all there is left to do is to pour out the remainder of that blood on the base, and in the burnt offering, place that meat on the altar to be burned, or in the case of the sin offering, some of it is eaten by the priest, the rest is burned on the altar. But the consumption of the meat is only after the remainder of that blood that was collected for sprinkling on the altar gets poured out on the base. So somehow before, after the sprinkling and before the remainder was poured out on the base, that's when the blood of the sin offering, the burnt offering, got intermingled. But if the final portion of the blood of a sin offering, i.e. the remainder of the blood that is poured onto the base of the altar, and the blood of a burnt offering were mixed, then everyone agrees that since the place of the blood of a burnt offering, below the red line, is the same as the place of the remainder of the blood of a sin offering, as the remainder of the blood of a sin offering is poured on the base of the altar, so then the priest shall place all the blood on the side of the altar below the red line. Rav Yosef said to Abaye, this is what Rav Yehuda says, the places are not the same, as the remainder of the blood needs to be placed on the bench, i.e. on the horizontal surface of the base itself, not on the side of the altar, as is the case with the blood of a burnt offering. Oh, so my mistake. It sounds like what got mixed was the remainder of a sin offering that was presented out above the red line, with the blood of a burnt offering that has not yet been presented on the altar. So that remainder of the sin offering blood is supposed to be poured out on the horizontal base of the altar. The blood of the burnt offering, which has not yet been presented on the altar, that needs to be applied to the side of the altar. So can you take this mixture and put it on the side of the altar below the red line? Can you do that? The Gemara notes that Amoraim of Eretz Yisrael, right, so the sages of the Talmud living in Eretz Yisrael, disagreed in the same manner as Abaye and Rav Yosef. And likewise, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says the Mishnah taught that according to the opinion of the rabbis, the blood shall be poured into the drain only if the first portion of the blood of a sin offering and the blood of a burnt offering was mixed. But if the final portion of a sin offering, right, the remainder, and the blood of a burnt offering that has not yet gone to the altar, if that was mixed, everyone agrees that since the place of the blood of a burnt offering is the same as the place of the remainder, meaning below the red line, even though one goes on the side and one goes on the horizontal surface of the base, still both are below the red line. Therefore, the priest shall place all the blood on the side of the altar, below the red line. Rabbi Yochanan says, and some say it was Rabbi Elazar who says, the case of the remainder of the blood of a sin offering that was mixed with the blood of a burnt offering is still included in the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis. Meaning Rabbi Eliezer would put this mixture on the side below the red line, but the rabbis would pour it down the drain because they still have different destinies. Remainder of the sin offering blood on a horizontal surface, blood of a burnt offering which has not yet made it to the altar, it needs to go on the side of the altar below the red line. Rav Huna bar Yehuda raises an objection from a baraisa. The verse states with regard to bechor, right? So this is the firstborn of a female kosher domesticated animal, and it was a male. If the firstborn was a female, then there won't be a bechor from the mother. But if the firstborn is a male, then it's a bechor brought to Jerusalem. sacrifice, blood presented, one presentation, and then the bechor is a gift to the priests, as opposed to animal tithe, which the owners will eat. Okay? So Rav Huna bar Yehuda raised an objection from a baraisa. The verse states with regard to bechor, they are holy, Numbers 18:17, and the emphasis of the term they seems to teach that even if the blood of a bechor was mixed with the blood of other sacrificial animals, the blood shall be sacrificed, as the blood of a bechor is not nullified. And what is it not referring even to a case of the final portion of the blood of a burnt offering and the blood of a firstborn offering that were mixed? Now, the remainder of the blood of a burnt offering after blood was taken from it and sprinkled, the remainder is supposed to get poured on the base, but that remainder got mixed with the blood of a bechor. Okay, so then what? And if so, one can learn from this baraisa. So what? Is it not referring to even the case of a final portion of the blood of a burnt offering and the blood of a bechor that were mixed, indicating that the priest places that mixture below the red line, I guess on the side of the altar? And if so, one can learn from this baraisa that the place of the blood of a burnt offering, which is also the place of the blood of a bechor, is the same as the place of the remainder of a sin offering. Could you learn that? The Gemara says no. The baraisa is referring to the first part of a blood of a burnt offering, what needs to go on the altar, and the blood of a bechor. But the Gemara raises a difficulty. But if so, what is the baraisa teaching us? Is it teaching us that the blood of offerings that is sent to the altar do not nullify one another? This law is already derived from the verse, and he shall take of the blood of the bull and of the blood of the goat, in Leviticus 16:18, from which it is understood that although the blood of two animals is in the same vessel, they each retain their distinct identity. We do that on Yom Kippur, where they mix the blood of the goat and the blood of the bull, and it's actually an assistant priest's job to keep stirring that, lest it coagulate while the high priest is doing all his duties on Yom Kippur. So they still maintain this separate identity in that mixture, as we just heard. And the Gemara answers, this is a dispute between Tanaim, as there's a Tana who derives this law from here, and there's a Tana who derives it from there. Rava raised an objection from a baraisa that discusses a verse describing a burnt offering. And the sons of Aaron, the priests, shall present the blood and sprinkle the blood. That's Leviticus 1:5. So the superfluous second mention of the blood teaches that it is still called the blood of a burnt offering, even after it was mixed with other blood. And therefore, it should be sprinkled in its proper manner. What does it mean when the verse states blood and then blood again? Now we're on page 81b, and the baraisa explains, if blood were written only once, one might have thought, I have derived only that this law was stated with regard to a case where this, i.e. the blood of a burnt offering, was mixed with the blood of its substitute. As even if these offerings were intermingled when the animals were alive, the burnt offering and its substitute shall be sacrificed. From where is it derived to include even a case of the blood of a thanks offering or a peace offering that was mixed with the blood of a burnt offering, as these offerings are not sacrificed if they become intermingled with a burnt offering while alive? So animals designated to become those offerings, and we don't know which is which, so then we have to let them graze, develop a blemish, sell them, redeem the money, and use that to purchase the correct offerings and then bring them. So the baraisa continues, and even if one says, I include in this first mention of blood the case of the blood of a thanks offering or a peace offering that was mixed with the blood of a burnt offering, as they are similar in that they both come as a vow offering and a gift offering, like a burnt offering, from where is it derived to include even a case of the blood of the guilt offering that was mixed with the blood of a burnt offering, as a guilt offering cannot be brought as a vow offering or a gift offering, right? Because guilt offerings are obligatory offerings for certain situations. They're not gift offerings like peace offerings and thanks offerings. And the baraisa continues, and even if one says, I include in this mention of blood even a case of the blood of the guilt offering that was mixed with the blood of a burnt offering, as they are similar in that a guilt offering requires the placement of two placements that are four, like a burnt offering, because they're opposite corners of the altar. So from where is it derived that the same applies to the blood of a bechor and the animal tithe and the Pesach, whose blood is placed once on the altar? Therefore, the verse states twice, blood and blood, and this repetition serves to teach that in any case where the blood of a burnt offering became mixed with the blood of another offering that is placed below the red line, the blood is presented. Right? Sounds like even the majority would agree, the sages would agree, as opposed to where the blood of a burnt offering became mixed with blood that needs to be presented above the red line, sin offering, then there's no remedy according to the rabbis, the majority. That mixture goes down the drain. But if blood of a burnt offering is mixed with any other blood that goes below the red line, even though some have 4 presentations, some have 2 that are 4, some have 1 presentation, the mixture can still be brought. And the Gemara analyzes this baraisa. And what is it not referring even to a case of the final portion, right? That remainder that goes on the base of the blood of a burnt offering and the blood of a bechor that were mixed? And if so, one can learn from this baraisa that the place of the blood of a burnt offering is the same as the place of the remainder of the blood of a bechor, right? So the remainder goes on the base, that horizontal area, but that's for the remainder, right? But now they're saying, okay, but the place of blood of a burnt offering, that's on the side. So just because both are below the red line, can that mixture be brought? One opinion is yes. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. So the Gemara answers no. No. The baraisa is referring to the first part, right? The original blood of a burnt offering that is awaiting sprinkling, and the blood of a bechor. But if so, what is the baraisa teaching us? Is it teaching that the blood of offerings that is sent to the altar do not nullify one another? This law is already derived from the verse, and he shall take of the blood of the bull and the blood of the goat. And the Gemara explains, this is a dispute between Tanaim, as there's a Tana who derives this law from here, and there's a Tana who derives it from there. Now, the Gemara has cited 3 different verses as the source for the law that the blood of offerings that is sent to the altar do not nullify one another. They are holy in Numbers 18:17. Quote, and he shall take of the blood of the bull and the blood of the goat in Leviticus 16:18. And the third location, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall present the blood and sprinkle the blood in Leviticus 1:5. So the Gemara notes, and these other Tanaim do not derive this principle from the verse, and he shall take of the blood of the bull and the blood of the goat. Why? Because they maintain that the high priest does not mix the blood of the bull and the blood of the goat in order to place the blood on the corners of the golden altar. Rather, each type of blood is placed separately. Additionally, these other Tanaim do not derive this law from the repeated mention of blood and blood, as they do not learn anything from this repetition. And the Gemara asks, but what is the reason that those other Tanaim, what is the reason that those other Tanaim do not derive this law from the verse they are holy in Numbers 18:17? And the Gemara explains they hold that the verse should be understood as follows: they are holy, i.e. they, the bechor, firstborn offerings themselves, are sacrificed, but their substitutes are not sacrificed. We learn that the substitute, the temura, let's say of an animal designated to be a burnt offering, now both the original animal remains consecrated and the substitute is also consecrated, and both of them shall be brought as sacrifices. But if you designate a substitute for a bechor, sounds like you don't bring the substitute as an offering, at least according to this opinion. So the Gemara asks, and the other Tana, i.e. the Tana who derives the law that the blood of offerings that is sent to the altar do not nullify one another from the verse they are holy, from where does he learn that the substitute of a bechor is not sacrificed? And the Gemara explains he derives it from the verse, whether it be ox or sheep, it is the Lord's, and the emphasis of it is teaches that it is sacrificed, but its substitute is not sacrificed. We'll knock off there, continuing tomorrow, Tuesday, at the regular Tuesday time, 6 p.m. Pacific, and I am seeing no questions or comments. So, that's what I got for today. God's help. See you tomorrow.